I'm going to be exposing all the popular and obscure games on the Bad Games Iceberg today. We're going to cover the recent Call of Duty games and Cyberpunk 2077 to M&ms racing on go-karts on the Wii, all the way to developers offering prizes with impossible puzzles to solve and pyramid schemes, my favorite. Make sure to watch until the end because there are some terrible games in tiers 6, 7, and 8.
Also, shout out to user ftzpltc.
Star Wars Battlefront 2. Almost everybody knows about this one. I mean, Star Wars Battlefront 2 is one of the worst infamous games for having expensive microtransactions and revealing how bad pay-to-win is. All of the good heroes and villains were locked behind hours of grinding, and people actually calculated that it would take more than 40 hours just to unlock one of these characters. Or you could pay for it without playing the game. I mean, that sounds great, right? No. It wasn't. This might slide for a free game, but this game cost $60 to $80 at launch. This was horrible publicity for EA, and their stock actually lost $3.1 billion in valuation after this. I guess not all publicity is good publicity. Fallout 76. This is known as one of those disappointing games that could have been a great idea if companies weren't as greedy. Fallout 76 launched with more bugs and glitches than any other Bethesda game, and there were items that you could buy that would make you better than people who didn't buy those items. On top of that, they launched a monthly subscription for private servers, and you had to pay $13 a month after you spent $60 on the game. What the f, Granny? This is one of those it's so bad that it's good type things. Granny blew up after YouTubers found and played it, and it became one of the most popular mobile games for a while. The game is kind of scary, to be honest. It's just that the graphics are just like, what the hell? Same with the animations, like you can just see what's wrong.
Granny, 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 granny.
Cyberpunk 2077. Do I even have to explain? Cyberpunk 2077 released in late 2020 and destroyed CD Projekt Red's reputation, the people who made the game. It was very rushed and should have been delayed by at least a year or two. At least to fix the bugs and glitches which were all around the game. The PS4 and Xbox One versions of the game were borderline unplayable unless you like slideshows. And the actual gameplay wasn't anything special either. The world was very empty feeling, and NPCs were brain dead, the crime system wasn't good, it was just an overall disappointment. The devs are still working on fixing it, and no end is really in sight. Among Us ripoffs. Among Us has become so sus in recent years that bad ripoffs have been made by fans. Bro, what the hell is this? Sonic 06. One of the most infamous bad games of the 2000s. Sonic the Hedgehog was Sega's attempt to bring 3D Sonic games to the new generation of consoles, the Xbox 360 and PS3. Unfortunately, the game was very rushed and the technology just wasn't advanced enough to bring their ideas to life. What we got was literally the slowest Sonic game in existence. In a game that's meant to be like really fast paced, this isn't even a Sonic game. It could just be some random third-person game if you just replace Sonic. But I think the worst part about this is, what is that? Why are there real people in a Sonic game, and why do they look like GTA 3 models?
Oh shit. Here we go again.
Black Ops 4. Honestly, I think this should just cover like all the main COD games that have come out in the last 5 to 6 years. I know Black Ops 4 was poorly received by a lot of people, but Infinite Warfare was rated even worse 2 years before Black Ops 4. Same with Vanguard and Cold War. They have mixed reviews, and a ton of people think it's generic and especially bad because of the skill-based matchmaking, showing that people are obviously tired of the old Call of Duty games. SimCity 2013. What was supposed to be a return to the SimCity series turned out to be a fail by EA. Surprise! You could only play online and you had to wait like 30 minutes to play it because of the bad servers. The game also pushed multiplayer so much and it saved your progress to the cloud. Meaning that if you messed up or you just wanted to play around with your Sims, you couldn't go back to a previous save state. EA was literally voted the worst company in America in 2013 after this disaster.
And fortunately, the thing doesn't randomly delete my footage anymore just because I lost connection to the server for the 35th time! what?
Hain and Lynch. It was literally just another third-person shooter like Uncharted or The Last of Us. Bland, generic, the graphics f***ing sucked, even for the time. FIFA. People have basically said the last 7 to 8 years of FIFA are the same game every year, just with updated players and a ton of new microtransactions. You can buy packs in these games where you have the chance of getting a good player to put on your team to compete with other teams online. It's a really predatory business model and it makes millions of dollars a year. The graphics and game modes have literally barely changed over the last decade, and this really goes for most sports games these days. Alien Colonial Marines. This was another flop by Sega and Gearbox, and for all the right reasons. It was another bland first-person shooter. I swear, man, it feels like half of the games in the 360 era were just third-person cover-based games or first-person shooters. Also, I found it crazy that the devs literally forgot to put the EXE game in the PC files, meaning that when people pre-ordered the game and downloaded it, you couldn't even play it. Like, how do you forget to put the game in the files before releasing it? Superman 64. He didn't know it just yet, but Superman's worst moment would come in 1999. Several publications gave this game below a 2 out of 10, and a lot of people consider it one of the worst games of all time. Looking at this game, it's literally just a green screen of fog with a few buildings. On top of that, this is like the slowest game on Earth when you're in a building. This is supposed to be Superman, not Farming Simulator. And there's these stupid rings that you have to pass in order to progress through the game, and if you miss one or two, you have to go back to the beginning when you're traveling. Like, there's no checkpoints or anything. No Man's Sky. Wow, this game has been through a lot. No Man's Sky was so anticipated after trailers came out for it that it was pre-ordered by everybody and their mothers in 2016. Unfortunately, the game did not live up to the hype, and it left millions wanting more. It was just a bland space exploration game. It promised billions of different planets to explore, but they were literally all the same thing with barely anything to do on them. It didn't help that the game didn't have multiplayer until 2 years later when it was promised at launch. Nonetheless, the developers have actually fixed the entire game, and now it's actually a really good game. They've even added way more features than they promised. Props to them. Shrek Extra Large and Shrek. Both of these games, besides being complete and utter dog were actually a commercial success. I mean, it's Shrek, so people are gonna be naturally attracted to it. Final Fantasy XIV. This piece of shit. I remember seeing this and being like, what? The game didn't feel smooth at all. I feel like I'm looking at a slideshow. The world was also bland, flat, and it didn't really make sense for an RPG. Basically, Square Enix messed up big time in 2010. So they just decided to say, F it. Let's release an entirely new game under the same name to cover up the mistake. But it's definitely not forgotten. Sonic Forces. Forces was supposed to be a fresh start for the Sonic series on PS4 and Xbox One, but it came with bad voice acting, basic levels, poor controller support. I mean, it was basically just Sonic 06 all over again, but 10 years later. Wii Music. What the hell even is this game? It's not even a game. This is honestly known for being one of the only Nintendo games on the Wii that flopped. Here, you literally just have your basic songs like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and you press the A button to hit musical notes, and that's it. It's not necessarily bad, but for being a $50 game, it was just way too bare bones. Unlimited Saga. This is a super weird one. On one hand, the people of Japan liked this game and gave it great reviews, while people from the West gave it horrible reviews. I mean, I've never seen something so split just because of a regional difference. Basically, the game gives no tutorials and doesn't explain how to actually play the game, but Japan praised the game for that factor. They said it was a really fun challenge. GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition. This one went crazy last fall, I'm sure a lot of you know. When Rockstar released a collection of GTA 3, San Andreas, and Vice City, people were obviously excited. Until they actually launched the game and saw that there were more game-breaking bugs, the new graphics destroyed the old nostalgic look, and there was music removed from the original games. To make it worse, the game was unplayable on computers for like 3 days, because Rockstar shut down the launcher to try and mitigate the problems. Overall, it showed that Rockstar couldn't care less about their fans and legacy. Fast and Furious Crossroads. Basically, since the release of the first Fast and Furious movies, people have wanted a good Fast and Furious game, and they still haven't got it. Crossroads literally looks like they spent a solid month developing the game and called it a day. I mean, this game is $60 and only 4 hours long. The cutscenes look like they were made in the PS2 days, and the actual driving isn't even fun. And there's barely any racing in a racing game.
Family.
Family.
E.T. E.T. is notorious for causing the video game crash of 1983, where the whole industry almost collapsed forever. E.T. was hyped like no tomorrow, with a large fan base from the movie that was released in 1982. The commercials for the game showed like 2 seconds of actual gameplay, which should have been the first red flag, but it played on people's emotions, showing kids waking up on Christmas and families playing E.T. on their Ataris. But this is known as one of the most unsuccessful games of all time, because when it was released, it was nothing like people thought it was going to be, especially after watching the movie. This game was programmed in 5 weeks before Christmas, and it shows. It looked bad and it was boring. Even worse, you had to read the manual to understand how to even play this abomination because the game didn't explain anything. Safe to say, Atari is not as popular as it used to be after this. Raid Shadow Legends. Thank you to our sponsors over at Raid Shadow Legends. Obviously, I'm just kidding. But this game overpromises on everything and turns out to be like this. I mean, just look at the trailer compared to the gameplay.
Let's play Raid Shadow Legends. Start
Battlefield 2042. Just like COD, Battlefield has also been on a downward spiral over the last few years. What made it worse was that the anticipation was so high for this game. I'm talking everybody and their moms were excited after they dropped the announcement. Then it came out and the game was empty. Like, they probably had a solid 5 people working on this game. Thanks, EA. There was no single player campaign and the multiplayer only had a couple of modes, along with it missing a ton of weapons and features usually in their games. And of course, it wouldn't be a modern game without connectivity issues, bugs, glitches, It's been 8 months and the first season of the game just released, which only added 2 guns and a single map. What? Yeah, this game literally has no hope. Yondir Simulator. This is another weird circumstance. The developer is so widely hated by so many people, but yet they still support and watch them create a new game that's been in progress for over 7 years. Besides being known for using very inefficient and slow coding techniques, the developer has also gone on to use hate speech on their own fans and has said very vulgar things to people who try and criticize them. Furthermore, it was supposed to be released in 2019. It's 2022, the game is not close to being done, mostly due to the fact that there's only one person working on the game and there is a clear lack of planning. Spice World. Spice World was based on a singing group in the 1990s. The characters look scary, even for a PS1 game, and the audio design is so bad for a game based off a band. Balan Wonderworld. One of the more recent releases, Balan Wonderworld was one of Square Enix's biggest failures ever, only selling 2,000 copies in its first week in Japan. This is the most basic platformer ever. There's only one action, and it's jump. Literally every button is programmed to jump. The controls and camera angles are weird too, and those are like the 2 most important things in a game. Hunt Down the Freeman. I hadn't heard of this beforehand, but I actually felt bad when I went to the Indiegogo and saw that this game only raised $12 out of a $100,000 goal. Don't even ask me how the hell this even got developed, but it did, and just look at it.
Start talking.
The aliens are coming. We've been compromised.
Spit it out, Corporal.
Oh, Colonel.
Basically, the game promised to have 40 gigabytes of cutscenes, and it had that. But it was made in a free animation software with terrible voice acting and a lack of sound effects that made the game feel empty. People also easily realized that the textures were stolen from a ton of other games and developers. On top of that, the game sucked and there were a ton of bugs. At least we got this masterpiece cutscene from the disaster that sums up the whole game.
What the f?
Hello Neighbor. I was really interested to see how Hello Neighbor held up over time. I used to see dozens of YouTubers playing it while it was in beta, and from what I understood while researching, this game seems like it was literally better when it was in its pre-release stages than when it got released. Hello Neighbor is a survival horror game that takes place in a house, and somewhere along the way, they completely changed the original house into a larger house. That was not fun at all. The new puzzles were just not fun, and they were actually annoying, defeating the whole purpose of playing the game. Surprisingly, a company bought out the whole Hello Neighbor franchise, so a sequel is on the way.
I like your cookie.
Ghostbusters 2016. After a series of bad Ghostbusters games, 2016 was no different. In fact, it was way worse than the rest. The game has no connection to the movies other than the fact that they attack ghosts, and the box art also looks nothing like the game. I mean, if I saw this, I would think that it's a realistic game instead of a cartoony one like it is. Along with boring gameplay, it's clear to see why people hated this. Garfield Kart. I know it's a meme and all that, but in reality, this game was not too hot when it first released. Since then, there's been a great sequel, but the original was bland, controlled horribly for a racing game, but just for the fun of it, we can remember this as the best kart racing game of all time. Like the Steam reviews praise it to be. Masterpiece.
Hey, Garfield Kart Gamers.
Rambo the game. This game was infamous for being terrible compared to the movie. This 2014 title released to critical acclaim. And I'm not talking about the good critical acclaim. This is the 15th worst video game on Metacritic, and for great reason. It really does look reminiscent of a bad PS2 game, just released 15 years too late. You can't even fully control your character. It's like an arcade game just on a controller. Batman Dark Tomorrow. Another movie turned into a game. It featured all the usual features. Bad graphics, bad controls, bad animation, a ton of glitches. Fast and Furious Showdown. Another Fast and Furious game. Showdown was released in 2013 on the 360, PS3, Wii U, and of course the 3DS. Don't even get me started on the 3DS version. The driving just sucks. Like, how can you mess up driving on a game that's only played in cars? That's like having a fast-paced shooter, but the movement sucks. Oh. Wait, Bomberman Act 0. This game released on the 360 and still looks like a PS2 game, and the movement sucks. Oh yeah, and there's a small little problem with progression. This game has 99 different levels and you can't save at all. So you have to complete all 99 levels in one sitting. Not like that's a problem though, because the game clocks in at a mere 2 hours long. But yeah, I mean, how do you not have a native save feature in a game like this? Oh yeah, and one more thing, this is how Bomberman looked before, and this is how he looked in the game. What the hell? NBA Unrivaled. How you mess up a basketball game this badly is unknown to me. They were trying to copy the old arcade style basketball games, but just ended up with a horribly animated mess. Like, why do they move so choppy? And why does the player do that when you run into another player? This also looks like another PS1 game, to be honest. And just to make it worse, this game was dead on arrival. This IGN review posted 6 months after the game launched said that there were only 12 people on the PSN leaderboards, meaning that barely anybody bought the game. Mario Tennis Ultra Smash. Honestly, Nintendo has dropped the ball on some of its sports games recently. I'm looking at you, Switch Sports, and Ultra Smash was one of the worst. They rushed it for the 2015 holiday season, and as a result, the game didn't have basic modes like tournament mode, and it only had one map. It was really repetitive, didn't have much going for it, included a ton of bugs. Nothing was good about it. Duke Nukem Forever. Another infamous bad game. Duke Nukem Forever was stuck in development hell for over 14 years. Yeah, it was announced in 1997 and it released in 2011. That's like a whole 3 console generations apart. It wasn't a surprise then that the game looked like this when it came out. The gameplay was dated and the writing and story completely sucked in a game where the main character was supposed to be the most badass person in the universe. Like, what the hell is this?
Oh, yeah.
Saw 1 and 2 were third-person horror games that blew ass. They looked very bad for the time. And Saw 2 looked even worse than the first one, released a year later. Like, how does that even happen? Along with the boring gameplay that wasn't even scary, these two left Konami out of a lot of money. Pokemon Channel. I have no idea why this even exists, to be honest. You basically just become a couch potato, and after spending $50 on this game, you get to choose from a couple different TV channels to watch with Pikachu. You really just watch the TV channels and play some minigames. I appreciate it for being a cool little thing, but it seems like a demo instead of a game that's worth $50. Chibi Robo Ziplash. Nintendo tried to guilt trip fans into buying this generic platformer on the 3DS because they said they wouldn't make another game in the series if it didn't sell well. And it didn't sell well. So they abandoned the series and left the slow-paced platformer in the dust. This is the original Chibi Robo on the GameCube, and this is the 3DS game. I mean, it has nothing to do with the original and doesn't represent it at all.
This game blows.
Flatout 3, Chaos and Destruction. Considered one of the games of all time. Literally. This is yet another racing game, and what could have gone wrong went wrong. The controlling of the vehicles in this game is worse than anything I've ever seen, to be honest. The worst part about it is the physics. Flatout is a series known for being fun for good car destroying physics because it's a demolition derby game after all. But that very feature is broken. It's so unrealistic that it isn't even funny. Sometimes you'll crash into someone at full speed and you'll have no damage dealt, and sometimes you'll bump into a fence and jump out of the car, being totaled out of the universe. It seems like a crime that you're still able to buy this on Steam. Sonic Boom. Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric, and Shattered Crystal released on Wii U and 3DS and got huge backlash. I actually remember playing the Wii U demo because I was too broke to afford the real game, and I'm kinda glad that I didn't have a chance to buy it. Both games featured dangerously slow levels. I mean, this wasn't even a fast-paced Sonic game anymore, it was just another slow platformer. Also, bad physics, combat, level design, etc. contributed to this being one of the worstly reviewed Sonic games. Postal 3 and 4. Both of these games have a spot in hell. Postal is a series that's meant to be offensive / make fun of societal norms and that kind of stuff, but these two games were just genuinely bad. Like, look at Postal 3. This game looks goofy, but I think the funniest part is that the publisher outsourced the development of this game to a company called Trash Masters. Literally, they're called Trash Masters. How ironic is that? And of course, they didn't have the right resources to properly make the game, so it turned out like this. Postal 4, while it might not have played as bad, was still pretty terrible in the sense that the comedy wasn't funny. You know, the only thing that people liked Postal 4 wasn't in Postal 4, Goat Simulator. Honestly, I think this is weird to put on here. On one hand, this game did get some bad reviews when it first came out, but this game is meant to be a funny open world where you can just explore. A ton of YouTubers played it and made it popular back in 2014. And I mean, the game was released on April Fool's Day. Obviously, it wasn't supposed to be taken too seriously. Do you guys like this game? Let me know. I don't think it deserves to be on here. Pokemon Dash DS. Pokemon Dash is probably the lowest rated game in the entire franchise. It was a spin-off title released in 2004, and I don't know if you can even tell, but this is actually a racing game. Yeah, they basically made you use the stylus to control your Pokemon as they tried to dash to the finish line. I found this review on Metacritic where somebody said, when people ask you to spice it up for once, they aren't asking you to pour spoiled milk in it. I guess Nintendo wanted to make a completely different Pokemon, and in turn, it was mediocre. Big rigs. This game has really faded in recent years, but it was largely infamous for being literally the worst reviewed game on Metacritic, coming in at a whopping 8 out of 10. Everything about this title is just perfect for a racing game. I mean, what's not to love? You can go through any object, there's no competition or any other truck drivers to race against, so you always win, and there is no sense of realistic acceleration. You can literally just go up a mountain at 200 miles an hour, going faster than you did on the road. Truly a certified hood classic. This has nothing on Forza.
Off-road traction, more power for non-stop driving action. Over the road racing, above the road, under the road, who knows?
Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival. Man, Nintendo was struggling hard in 2015. That's why when fans thought they were getting a new Animal Crossing game on the Wii U, it came as a shock when it was simply a bland board game that used Animal Crossing amiibos. Not only were fans upset, but the actual game sucked. You had to buy more amiibos to unlock more content in the game, which you could scan into the Wii U. After you scanned them, you were stuck with a game that's pure luck, had boring dialogue, clunky controls, barely any content. See, what made Mario Party special was that it had a ton of minigames along the way. The Amiibo Festival literally had no minigames. You just went around and kept on rolling the dice until somebody won or you got bored, and usually you'd get bored first. Umbrella Corps. Umbrella Corps is considered the worst game in the Resident Evil series, and for good reason. It's a zombie survival game and the zombies just ignore you, like they don't even attack you. Like, what is this? It looks like they were making a mobile game and said, screw it, let's put it on console and PC. It can't be that bad. There's also cheesy looking animations, and for some reason, you crawl faster than you run. Not even joking. Spogs Racing. This is a low-key title on the Wii, and honestly, it makes no sense. Mario Kart Wii exists, so this doesn't have to. Nonetheless, people bought this contraption and discovered it doesn't use cars, carts, motorcycles, not even trucks. You have to use this What the f? is this? It's like a huge tire if you had an acid trip. Anyway, this is the lowest rated Wii game on Metacritic, and you can see why. Life of Black Tiger. Just judging from this title, it's a masterpiece. It's just Life of Black Tiger, not Life of a Black Tiger, just a random black tiger. Anyway, this is probably Sony's biggest embarrassment in the last 10 years. One day in 2017, a trailer popped up on the official Sony YouTube channel, and there's no way in hell they even bothered to look at the trailer before uploading, because if you just take one look at the trailer, it does not look like a modern game. Like, I didn't know the PS2 was still getting games. But the best part is that the fact that there's an ominous rated M for mature warning, and then 2 seconds later, the most innocent song in the history of man plays. The game is just violent for no reason, and you go around hurting innocent people and animals, and I cannot get over these graphics. I don't know how they even managed to make it look this bad. As one comment said, this really pushes the PS1 to its limits. Alone in the Dark Illumination. This is another one that I had no idea about. Honestly, it's really similar to Umbrella Corps. It attempts to be a survival horror game, however, not scary at all. There's brain dead zombies walking around, bad graphics, physics, glitches, bugs, and it's boring. Gravity Games Bike Street Vert Dirt. Alright, what the f is this name? Did the publishers really sit down and say, yeah, that sounds good? Like, no. But anyway, this is a BMX game with pretty bad controls, so unfortunately it's not that fun. It's actually the worst rated PS2 game on Metacritic, so at least it has that going for it.
Don't play this game.
Troll and I. I'm sorry to say, but this game is the one trolling you. I'm sorry if you play this. I mean, the most important model in the game, the giant troll, sucks. Couldn't you have spent a little more time on his character design? And the gameplay is glitchy and boring. Charlie's Angels. This is a fighting game with like 2 combos. Unoriginal gameplay, graphics, plot. I mean, this doesn't even look like a PS2 game. And this is the entire game for 3 hours. Modern Angry Birds. Yeah, people are not too excited about the recent Angry Birds games, being boring and unoriginal and too easy compared to the original games. Rovio has really upset fans in recent years. Sonic R. Oh boy. This is a full price game with 5 stages that can be completed in under an hour. I think that's enough said, and those 5 stages are riddled with glitches, slow paced gameplay. If I wanted to do a puzzle, I would get a book and do a crossword. This sucks. Defiance/Defines 2050. I'm sad to admit it, but I actually played this game and thought it was pretty good. Looking back on it though, I can see how it's bad. It's the same thing over and over again with no end in sight. While it's better than most games that stem from TV shows, Defiance on the 360 and PS3 was just like any old third-person shooter. When Defiance 2050 came for the PS4 and Xbox One though, a new exciting world with new story, guns, cosmetics, missions. Yeah, they had none of that. 2050 was the exact same game with a new name 8 years later. The graphics, story, and progression were all copy and pasted from the original, and the glitches and bugs from the original game also stayed. Warcraft 3 Reforged. Reforged was a remaster of Warcraft 3, which did nothing but upset fans. The graphics were the same in 2020 as they were in the early 2000s too, and it didn't help that it was a storm of bugs. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. I added this game to the iceberg and I put it so low because I feel like this failure has to be remembered. People have seemed to forget about it, but yeah, I haven't. This game was so rushed it wasn't even funny. I mean, the main game was 4 gigabytes when it was released, right? And the day 1 update was 8 gigabytes. The first day's update was literally twice the size of the actual game. That's nuts. Along with terrible bugs and boring levels and gameplay, this game sits as an unfinished product to this day. Ride to Hell Retribution. Released for PS3, 60, and PC, this game's name is accurate to the experience. It's an actual ride to hell, if you manage to complete it. Numerous bugs, glitches, but worst of all, terrible story. The dialogue, cutscenes, and plot of this is cringe to the extreme. Bad jokes and corny lines are filled throughout this game, which also looks like a PS1 game released in 2013. And talking about the animations, oh, the facial animations might be some of the worst I've ever seen. Let's just take a look at some of this shit. hatred. This title was released to stir up controversy. And when you create something hoping to get a reaction out of the media, it usually doesn't work because of the fact that people can tell you're just trying to get a reaction. Hatred was a cringy, top-down view shooter that basically housed generic gameplay. However, it at least worked, but this game really came down to the story, and the game was even temporarily removed from the Steam store. See, this story is just based on a psychopath that's violent just for the sake of being violent. Combined with the generic emo main character, I feel like this game was just trying too hard. Chicken Shoot Wii, one of the best games of all time. Chicken Shoot. After being released in 2000, it was ported to multiple different systems, and they all sucked. The art style is reminiscent of 2000's Flash games if an 8-year-old made it, and it's really just a lazy arcade game on the Wii. Fling Smash. Fling Smash for the Wii is another classic. It was bundled with a free controller, so I'm pretty sure that's the only reason people bought this game. Flinging this random ball into the wall and scoring points is the only thing about this game. Whoever thought of that deserves a medal, honestly. Limbo of the Lost. Whenever a game is stuck in development hell, aka it takes more than 10 years to finish it, then it's usually never a good thing. This is really demonstrated by Limbo of the Lost. Started in 1994 and completed in 2007. Everything about this game looks like 1994, just released 15 years later. The cutscenes have god-awful animation, it runs at like 20 frames, and there are puzzles that you can only solve by looking up a guide. Oh yeah, and the developers also stole more than half of the assets from other games, but the absolute best part about this game is the ending. After the main character is found through dozens of hours of intense searching, he comes back and is greeted by a cast of horribly sung friends. And for some reason, the main character starts singing along too.
We've all had fun, you must agree.
It is low-key catchy though. Two Worlds. This game was supposed to be a direct competitor and win over the fanbase from Bethesda's Oblivion game. Unfortunately, it never happened due to a much worse story, terrible animation and voice acting, and just a mediocre game in general. The actual gameplay isn't too bad, and I heard a lot of people still enjoy this title from time to time if you can look past the weak parts of it. Compared to the hype behind this game, it was kind of a flop when it came out. I also found it weird how they tried to avoid piracy. They would make you type in your whole address, phone number, name, birthday, etc. just to make sure you weren't illegally downloading it. That's kind of overboard for, you know, a video game. Lula 3D. Coming out in 2005, this was probably quite a shock to the world. You only need to see the box art to understand what this game is about. Anyway, there's so many bugs and glitches, and the whole game just seems pointless and stupid because of bad plot and unfunny humor. Also, I found it kind of crazy that they stole the game's audio from questionable sources. Yeah, you can look that one up yourself. Tony Hawk Ride. Having a skateboard accessory, people thought this game had huge potential. The motion controls could have worked well for a skateboarding game. Well, it didn't. Along with the fact that it cost $120 new with the skateboard accessory, this was probably the worst waste of money for a gamer in 2009. People immediately stopped playing once they found out the board inputs were wildly incorrect. You might not even be on the board and the character would start moving by himself. Iron Man. In 2008, Iron Man's worst moment appeared in front of home console owners. With cutscenes that looked straight out of the 90s and bad gameplay, it wasn't fun to fly around Iron Man. This idea has mad potential though. I mean, just look at what Sony did with Spider-Man. Rogue Warrior. Rogue Warrior was pretty big around the time of its release, even getting a permanent ban from being sold in Germany due to being too violent. It's a mix of first and third person, and it definitely didn't live up to its hype. I mean, this game was advertised as a tactical shooter, but there's barely any stealthy features and the game always breaks out into a large-scale fight. On top of that, they really tried to outdo themselves being both first and first person, making both modes of playing unenjoyable. M&ms kart racing. I don't even know why this game is on a bad games list iceberg. M&M Mario Kart is the underdog of racing games and is better than Mario Kart Wii, undoubtedly. It has better graphics, controls, camera angles, voice acting. Yeah, I don't know who came up with this idea. Also, for a racing game, it's painfully slow. Like, yeah, I get you want to be realistic, but this is a game where M&Ms are literally talking to each other, and they have their driver's license. It's fine though, I still give it a 9 out of 10.
Oh my god. Even the M&M doesn't want to be playing this game.
Afro Samurai 2, Revenge of Kuma. This game was so bad that they were forced to refund the 6.5 people that bought it. I'm just kidding. This game was actually pretty hyped up because Afro Samurai 1 was a hit on the PS3 and Xbox, but when I watched gameplay of Afro Samurai 2 for the first time, like, I immediately noticed this game was basically unplayable. Terrible controls and glitches and bad level design, but most of all, the god-awful audio.
Throw yourselves from the high cliffs onto this abomination and cover him in your blood as you shoot.
Sometimes there's music screaming in your ear, and sometimes you can barely hear the main character talk. I think they literally just got some random guy off the street to mix the audio levels, because I don't know how the you mess it up this bad. Little Britain. How in the hell did anybody approve this game? Little Britain is based on a TV show that's British. You would have never guessed, right? This game just flat out sucks. Like, there's 7 minigames and they're all boring. You control this fat ass as you try to stack the cans of jam on top of each other. What a stereotype. And the design for this game is literally scary. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you have nightmares after seeing this. Ninja Bread Man. Ninja? Bread? Man? If you haven't picked up a Nintendo Wii yet, this is your time to do so. Just to play this masterpiece. Coming in at a $50 retail price in 2007, this game can be completed in a sheer 8 minutes. Yeah, the entire game. Poor motion controls, bad graphics, and generic gameplay. So after all those features, they decided to release another 3 platformer games for the Wii, PS2, and PC. And when I say this is the laziest thing to be done in all of gaming, I mean it. They actually copied the same animations, controls, enemies, music, etc. The only thing they changed in the later games was just the textures to match the game's theme. That was so fucking lazy. Action Girls Racing. Oh yeah, this is gonna be a good one. You know it's good when they use a Z at the end of the word instead of an S. They're really appealing to the new generation. What the hell is this? I thought M&M's kart racing was bad, but this is a whole nother league. Again, it's slow as balls, the tracks are poorly designed, and the characters are generic. At least in M&M's kart racing, I have a close connection to the candies. Yeah, I'm talking about the green ones specifically. Legend of Zelda CDI games. I actually had no idea about these games, but they were a collection of Zelda games released in the 90s on Philips computers. Yeah, this was when Nintendo was still willing to release their games outside of their own consoles. I can't believe something like this even made it out to the public, because basically the gameplay is just completely different from traditional Zelda games. It's more like a platformer, but the real gold is in the cutscenes. The animators drew out every single frame and made for some pretty interesting moments. But nowadays, these games range from a few hundred to thousands of dollars. Drake of the 99 Dragons. Developers of this game only had 18 months to create a new game, and it didn't work. This third-person shooter has boring and bad shooting, and the graphics are bad, even for an original Xbox game. Nickelodeon Kart Racers. I heard about this game before, and I actually thought it was like a pretty good game before I researched this. Apparently, Nick's kart racing game flopped hard in 2018 because of it being another random car racing game. The models and graphics are pretty scary too. Like, I don't understand how it looks like this. I don't know why, but looking at this reminded me of an arcade game I played younger, so I looked it up, and I'm pretty sure this is the game I remember playing. Does anybody else remember this game? Because that would be pretty cool. Let me know. Beverly Hills Cop 2006. This generic first-person shooter had terrible animation, graphics, sound effects, and more. It was sad because it was based off a good movie and the developers took it and turned it into some random cash grab on the PS2. I think the weirdest thing about this is there's not even a single word in this game. During cutscenes, there's literally just a dialogue box that pops up and you're forced to read it because they didn't have the budget to hire the actual voice actors. Like, you didn't even have to use the original actors. You could have just hired some random Joe off the street and it would have been better than just reading it off the screen. Like, look how empty and cursed this game feels because of a lack of any talking. It feels like somebody just took a game and removed all the audio from it to be funny. Also, during the stealth parts of this game, you can literally just shoot people in front of their faces and they won't bother or do anything. They stand there like you aren't holding a gun right up to their face. I mean, it's nice to just let people do what they want, right? Skyscraper Simulator. This quote-unquote game was released in 2010, and it can go back to the dead. Playing this game is like watching paint dry, in the sense that you don't really do anything and you just watch people build skyscrapers. That's literally it. There's nothing else to this game, and it has horrible graphics and tons of bugs, so you probably won't even reach the top of the skyscraper before the game randomly crashes. Also, what the hell is this idea? Like, you could have made a million other simulator games, but you chose to make Skyscraper Simulator. This is probably the worst idea for a simulator game I've ever seen. The Guy Game. This one is pretty unknown to the public, but it was kind of infamous for being illegal to own or sell, at least in the US. This is because the game contains, well, the actual game isn't even a game. I mean, you just answer questions and watch this random dude interview girls on a beach. Safe to say, the idea was flawed from the start. 007 Legends tried to be Modern Warfare so badly, but it never reached that level. I wanted to include this game as a tribute to the developers because apparently 75% of the devs were laid off a month before this game released. Meaning, this is what happens when your team knows they're about to be fired and is forced to work on a game. I actually remember going to GameStop when I was younger and looking at it, and I wanted it so bad for my Wii U, but I guess it's a good thing I didn't pick it up. Homie Rollers. Damn, how many bad kart racing games have we covered in this video? And this one also uses the iconic Z at the end of Rollers, but this game is actually so different from the others. Sure, it has poor gameplay, graphics, controls, everything like that, but it showed that Nintendo had no quality control on their DS products. This is because 1, the game is rated E for everyone, and 2, the game is blatantly racist towards a certain group of people. In a children's game, there are even racial slurs in the game. Like, I don't know how this game never got pulled from store shelves, but I think what's even weirder is that the trailer, which is literally posted on Nintendo's actual YouTube channel, contains these racial slurs and heavy stereotyping. I guess Nintendo didn't care what games were released on the DS after all. The Zoo Race. Another weird racing game. This one isn't on carts though, or boats, or cars. It's on legs. You gotta hit leg day somehow. You race other animals in this game and it has terrible controls. I don't know why, but the animations just look so funny, and for a 2007 game, I don't know how you got it to look this bad. Oh yeah, the plot is also based on Noah's Ark from the Bible, and there are literally just random Bible quotes that have nothing to do with the game. WWE 2K20, kinda notorious for being one of the worst sports games to ever release. After WWE 2K15 was a failure for having a limited roster and bad gameplay, you would think they learned from their mistakes, but they didn't. See, 2K didn't care at all, and as a result, released a half-finished product. I mean, the graphics here are worse than WWE games 5 years before it. The online version is just straight unplayable too, and it has this often infinite loading time screen, and there are more bugs and glitches than you can count. A ton of game modes are also missing from this entry, and all the game modes are dumbed down compared to previous years. Seriously, how do they manage to downgrade the series so hard? As a result, basically everybody that year just stuck to the old WWE 2K19 game. Leisure Suit Larry box office bust. This is the 5th worst rated game on Metacritic, and for great reason. It sucks. The design choices are literally nerve-wracking. The animation and faces don't match up to the bad voice acting, and the game is boring. The series basically caters to an adult audience, if you get what I mean. Down bad. But yeah, the game models are so bad and ugly that it even takes away all the pleasure of playing this game. Family Guy Online. This game wasn't rated that badly, but I guess it made it onto the iceberg for failed hype. Fans of Family Guy probably would have been pretty excited if this was a good MMO game, but it failed because the entire game was literally an ad. You were constantly bombarded with movie, product, and other promo advertisements in the middle of playing. Oh yeah, and the actual gameplay didn't really have much to do. I think a more fair Family Guy game to put on here is Back to the Multiverse, because it's one of the worst rated Xbox 360 games. It's just another clunky platformer that looks like it was made for the Wii eShop. It's really ironic that this game promised a multiverse of locations, but ended up being the same location for every level. Elf Bowling 1 and 2, considered to be the worst of all DS games. And that's a pretty hard thing to do. If it was actually included in the list of worst games, it would actually make it to second to last. Nonetheless, this game featured intuitive gameplay, having the worst menu in history, and contained controls that were barely responsive. On top of bad gameplay, the game was available to play online for free, and for some reason it was paid on the DS. What gets crazier is the DS devs literally stole the game without any permission illegally. They just said, "F it, let's publish the game on the DS." Yeah, this led to the game being pulled from stores a week after launch, but it's still insane how this even made it to stores in the first place. For some reason, Santa's back is revealed, and yeah, you can use a bowling ball to run over innocent elves. Dead Rising 4. This game is pretty interesting, because on one side, it's a bad Dead Rising game, but on the other side, it's not like a bad game in general, it's pretty decent. I personally played this title a few years ago, and I loved it, but I agree it's out of place for the Dead Rising series. Another thing is that Frank, the main character, is less dark compared to the first games and instead tries to be funny, which actually leads to the game being very unfunny, ironically. The game was also really easy, which I do have to admit.
I love mini golf.
Yaris, the 4th worst rated game on Metacritic. Yaris is based on the Toyota Yaris, meaning that the entire game is just a promo for Toyota, but it actually failed at even doing that because the cars don't even use the actual Yaris logo. So what's the point of even making this game? The actual gameplay sucked. It included Yaris cars shooting random stuff in space. Seriously, there are flying MP3 players. The graphics are also majorly dated for an Xbox 360 game. The driving physics are bad, really showing off the true potential of the Yaris. Arc Lord, probably one of the worst online role-playing games released in the 2000s. It was very underwhelming. Maybe this even inspired EA because pay to win was in this game in 2007. True innovators of their time. It took hours to grind for semi-decent gear, but it didn't matter when you could just pay a few bucks for it. The actual grinding was so tedious to the point where it was boring and derived from any sort of fun. And the game had a small cult fan base, so there were definitely people who enjoyed some aspects of it. Personally, it looks void of any story and content, so I don't see the point of it. Hong Kong 97. This was an unofficial game developed for the SNES in 1995. Apparently, the story behind this game is pretty interesting, and it was made in under a week. The guy who designed this game said he was trying to mock Nintendo's strict quality control by creating a gruesome game. The plot for this game, it was to try to destroy a popular type of government in China back in the 1900s. And yeah, just by playing this game, you can tell the dev had a strong hatred towards the people involved, if you get what I mean. The actual gameplay is a horrible 2D shooter, and it was one of the first games ever to contain profanity and extremely gruesome images. I don't even recommend that you look this game up because it's pretty messed up and really bad stuff is there. Additionally, only 30 copies of the game were sold, making this extremely rare. Kabuki Warriors. Rated the worst game of 2001, Kabuki Warriors took the fighting game scene by violent storm. For a fighting game where movement is one of the most important aspects, it's limited. The enemies are also very easy to win and they all look the same, which isn't complemented by terrible visuals. And what the f is going on in the background? There's somebody screaming whenever you make a selection in the main menu. The Calling 2. This is a sad case, to be honest. The leftovers of developers that were probably jealous of the rise of Battle Royale games at the time. Starting with the first game, The Calling was a game that had the traces of being one of the first Battle Royale games. It was a bit different than today's Battle Royales though, because it was focused on melee combat only and was based as a game show. There was a huge fan base for it, lots of people loved it, so the only logical thing to do was create a completely different game and disregard old fans. The Calling 2 was a blatant copy of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds and basically had nothing to do with the first game. It had all the guns that PUBG had and tried to mimic its movement as much as possible, and the attempt wasn't even a good one as the graphics and movement were terrible and the gunplay was bad too, while running at like 20 FPS. This game was literally dead on arrival, having a non-existent player count and only reached a maximum of 249 players at once. Their attempt to cash in on the whole Battle Royale craze failed horribly with The Calling 2 and ruined the legacy of the series. 101-in-1 explosive mega mix for the Wii/DS. This game was originally developed for the DS, where the controls and minigames were bad to begin with. Then Atlas ported a DS version to the Wii. Now imagine a mobile game where you have to use your fingers to control it, just with a Wii remote. Safe to say, this game was 101% a scam, only coming in with 11 games to begin with and leaving it up to you to sit through challenges to unlock the other games. It seems like so many of these games that just contain a bunch of minigames turned out as failures, except for Mario Party. Unearthed Trail of Ibn Battuta. Also, the poor man's Uncharted. Everything from this game is copied from Uncharted, down to the main character. He looks like Nathan Drake if Nathan Drake literally did crack. The animations, voice acting, and graphics are out of this world. Literally.
The attacker was killed by a sniper before I could find out anything.
What is the point of that?
Morphman. When I see this, I think, what the heck am I looking at? This is a point and click game, which should just be a run and run game as soon as you see this. First of all, the game ran slower than an actual PowerPoint slideshow. Second of all, the controlling is terrible, and you only have a few seconds to press these on-screen buttons before you die. And third, if you don't press the button in time, you have to start the game all over again. Talk about bang for the buck. You have to restart the whole story, which isn't even explained, every time you mess up. Even for 1993, I don't know who let this become real. Family Party 30 Great Games Obstacle Arcade Wii U. What a title. And actually the worst reviewed Metacritic game of all time. Well done. This is really similar to 101 Games in 1 on the Wii, except this one only has 30. And that's actually a lie, because the title is straight up a lie. First of all, the mini games are not great, as suggested by the title, and there are actually 35 games, not 30. Like, did the publisher just forget about the other 5 games in the bundle? But anyway, the actual games are boring, poorly designed and coded, and yeah, I think you get the gist. Also, this has to be the worst cover art I have ever seen for any piece of media ever. This is the Japanese cover, but I don't understand why they could have just, not used the better North American cover. And what's so weird is on the Japanese cover, they have 35 mini games displayed, but yet they still call it 30 games in 1. I don't even know what to say. Vroom in the Night Sky. Released in 2017 on the Nintendo Switch as a launch title, it showed that the Nintendo Switch was about to have a crazy ride for trash games on the eShop. And if you were somebody who bought and played this as your first Switch game, then I'm so sorry. I probably would have taken the whole Switch and just returned it after this. This game is so lazy that there's really no enjoyment you can get from it, and you just keep on collecting Stardust / going through rings until you get bored. The translation for the English has also been criticized because I think they literally just ran it through Google Translate and called it a day. A lot of stuff just doesn't make sense and can lead to pretty funny moments. What's even funnier is they released an update later on to fix the English issues, but it actually made the English translation worse. Mortal Kombat Advance. This is a port of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and it's probably one of the worst Game Boy Advance games. I mean, for a fighting game, I see how it would be hard to make because the Game Boy only has an A and a B face button, so they just said f it and combined 2 attacks onto 1 button. Also bad controls, graphics, AI, etc. The Town with No Name. This should probably be the game with no name, because I don't know if you even want to name this. Another point and click game in the 90s. The funniest part is that it's supposed to take place in the American Wild West, but the game was developed in the UK, meaning the whole game was narrated by British people. Half of them didn't even try to hide their British accent, and half of them put on the worst American accent I've ever heard. The animations are also terribly drawn, and it looks more like a cursed fan game than an actual game produced by a studio. But this is one of those games where it's so bad that it's good. Infestation Survivor Stories. Remember when we talked about big rigs over-the-road racing? Well, some of those devs went over to make a new game. I mean, maybe racing games just weren't for them? This online survival horror game will probably make you terrified by just looking at it. I'm just kidding. I mean, this compared to big rigs is a crazy improvement, and I'm proud of the developers, to be honest. The game was trying to copy DayZ, another popular survival game, and at the time even was extremely basic. Though there's a lot of bugs, stolen assets, unbalanced weapons, bad optimization, and more, I can't fault this game. It had a pretty large fan base who appreciated the simple gameplay, which made it addicting, especially with friends. Reading some of the memories that people had with this game kinda makes me nostalgic for a game I never even played. One thing I don't support though is the microtransactions. You could pay for armor and weapons, spending over $100 in a single session, and you would actually lose all the items if you died. What's even worse is the game didn't tell you this, and it didn't tell you that you would lose the weapons. I would definitely expect to keep all the things I bought if I paid real money for them. And to add fuel to the fire, hackers were rampant everywhere when the game was nearing the end of its life cycle. It was shut down in 2016, 4 years after it launched, but has since come back as a free-to-play game. Unfortunately, the game seems worse than before, and there are more bugs and hackers nowadays. Plumbers don't wear ties. Pretty blunt title, right? This quote-unquote game is actually more of a movie or slideshow, unfortunately, and somebody actually ported the whole game to Microsoft PowerPoint. No joke. It's supposed to have a love story, but the writing is so bad that, well, it's more like a comedy.
No, I'm serious. I'm really a plumber.
John, plumbers don't wear ties. Now come on, stop fooling around.
And the title is a straight lie. The main character actually does wear a tie. The Sniper PS2. Honestly, right off the bat, I can say the cover art for this game is awesome. I love it. But honestly, that's where the good stuff ends, because yeah, that's where they put most of the budget, into the artwork. And this game just consists of multiple polygons stacked on top of each other, and might be the worst shooter I've ever seen. Have you ever played like one of those mobile sniping games? Well, yeah, this is like that, but 100 times worse. From the short amount of content to bad cutscenes, boring gameplay, etc. Doshin the Giant, Liberation Front, Chibi-Oko, Chico Collection. This is a really unknown and rare expansion to Doshin the Giant, an N64 game that was never released in the West. The expansion itself is the bad part, and it was given 2.5 out of 10 by IGN for being absurd. Basically, after you complete a chapter of Doshin the Giant, you can pop in this expansion and you'll play like a little black and white movie to watch. People have said it made no sense with the story, and it's poorly animated and controlled. Falafel Shop Simulator. This came out in 2020 and the world has not been the same since. A little underrated game about cooking falafels, a Middle Eastern food, has topped the charts of Steam owners. And was that game good? No. The developer released the game and abandoned it soon after, with not much to do in the game. I wanted to include this because this game describes thousands of Steam games that have been unfinished because they were put into early access and the devs just abandoned them. The Letter Wii U. Another unappreciated gem. The Letter was surprisingly accepted onto the Wii U eShop, just like Meme Run, another horrible game. And yeah, Slender was very popular at the time, so to capitalize off the trend, devs released The Letter. Unlike Slender though, there was nobody chasing you around. The whole point of the game, I mean, it's diminished. There's no one actually chasing you. It's not scary. You also can't die, and combined with the fact that it's only 15 minutes long, I'd say this is a really poor attempt. Cosmic Race. This is such an unknown game, and that's why it's weird. Yeah, it did what Big Rigs did in 2003, but 8 years earlier in 1995. Being a PS1 game, the team behind this literally copied all the assets from the PlayStation Developer Toolkit, which was only meant to play around with the developer mode. After they used only the default assets, they went on to use poor controls. They used the R1 trigger to accelerate forward, and they used like the little D-pad to move around, which was very strange at the time. But the thing that made this game similar to Big Rigs was the fact that the devs had no sense of collision detection. You literally could just go underneath the whole map, and you could go outside of the race border, making the game really boring. Hair Razor. This is one of the weirdest games ever made in my opinion. In 1984, a small studio known as Hairsoft released a game called Hair Razor. By the way, the game flopped so hard that they were forced to liquidate the company and still aren't around. Anyway, the marketing for this game was centered around the fact that you could get rich if you solved the puzzle. That sounds great, doesn't it? Basically, if you solved the puzzle, you would win a statue of a golden hair worth 30,000 euros. Well, nobody actually ever completed the puzzle, and we'll get to that in a minute. Back to the game though, it absolutely blew ass. You didn't even get to control the hair. There were just like a total of 5 or 6 screens you could scroll through, and occasionally you would see a little hair running across the grass. Apparently you were supposed to quote unquote get clues from where the hair was going, but in reality the clues were either extremely specific or just complete BS and didn't exist, leading to nobody solving the puzzle. Even worse, Hairsoft didn't release the whole game at once. They made you buy 2 parts of the game, and each part cost more than full-priced games at the time. That's basically like if Activision released the next COD game in 2 parts and made you pay $60 for each part if you wanted to finish the campaign. So yeah, this game was bad and sold poorly as a result, even if you had a chance to win 30k. Fast forward 33 years later, and Stuart Ashen appeared at a gaming festival where he told the story of Hairraiser. At the end of his presentation, he revealed that he went deep into the game's files and cheated to find out that the whole prize was BS. Basically, the puzzle was actually impossible to solve, so the developers purposely made it impossible for the normal player to solve so they didn't have to give away their $30,000 golden hair. Bravo. But they had to give it away anyway when they went bankrupt. MLMs disguised as games. This is basically just most NFT games. These games are designed as pyramid schemes because they have a system of people who are at the top making the most money and people who are at the bottom who are making little to nothing when they first start. Peter Molyneux. Basically, this guy's infamous for ruining a few game franchises. In particular, Microsoft's Fable, in which he's considered to be the person who drove the series into the ground after a few bad choices, mostly lying about features, overpromising, and releasing some weird mobile games. He's currently working on an NFT game right now, so might want to check that out. Your game. Yup. This is the worst one. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what other icebergs you want me to cover. And yeah, leave a like, leave a comment. Join my Discord. That's in the description below. I love all y'all, and I'll see you in the next one.